God, like it says in Philippians. Part of loving God with our minds is about going to God through the reading of Scripture, or going to God with prayer and supplication, like it says in Philippians. Part of loving God with our strength is
right there is good. Come on. Okay. Okay, everybody. Well, I think I'm gonna start ahead of time. It's 11:59, which if you've ever seen me do this before, you know I'm never gonna finish on time. So although I've allotted an hour, can you guys mute yourself, please? Everybody, please mute yourself. Oh, 1 second here. You know what? I've got to turn off my, give me 1 second here. That's me. That's me. I gotta close this. Hopefully we're still live. I'm praying we're still live on the YouTubes. If not, it's unfortunate side effect is the fact that I hear an echo for myself. You probably can hear it too. So we make that go away. So ideally, I'm still live on and still broadcasting. I hope that's actually the case. Either way, here we are. We're at Optimizing Fascia Tendons Part 2. I'm going to be sending this out to all of you who've registered ahead of time regardless, and that's the vast majority of you. Thank you incredibly so much. There's so many of you registered. There's over 250 registrations. Might even be closer to 300. I don't expect to see a lot of people online, although I see the number is 26 at the moment and probably will climb and it will probably move in and out. If you didn't get a chance, please take a look at the part 1 that I sent out. It's very sciencey, has lots of research. It's the first time we presented some of that material, so I'd definitely like to clean that up in the future. But on the whole, what I wanted to do is just show you accumulation of all the different research. You understand the different topic areas we're going to cover off today, because today is going to be strictly practical. I got to get through a couple of slides just to sort of lay down what programming looks like for optimizing fascia and tendons. But it's going to be really fun. It's going to be highly practical. My wife Joanne is with me, so she's going to help me out along the way here through demonstrations, and she's going to start to do some of the techniques in the background even as I discuss them versus me being hands-on with her in some of the circumstances. So the first thing that we're going to actually end up doing is a bit of a scrubbing technique with using some foam rolling, etc. So we'll get to that in a little bit, but for now, I'm going to introduce this real quick and just say, there's my Instagram account. So I've also posted a snippet of some of the information I'm not going to cover today that's included in the slide deck in my recent Instagram. And I do cover off a lot of educational material inside the Instagram, a lot of practical application, hands-on useful techniques. So please give me a follow. One of the reasons why I'm able to offer things like this for free is because there's value in other things like following each other, seeing what each other's journeys look like. Me, if you're liking and commenting on some of my material, that'll give me insight into what you're doing, because I'll certainly pay attention to what you're doing as well. So it's really just about creating community. So when I have these opportunities to inject myself into a community of people that are like-minded, that are passionate about learning about human movement and how to optimize it is really powerful for me. So please just scan this if you wouldn't like. I'm going to give you a second opportunity because to the point of what some of the things I want to talk about today is that the reason why I'm able to offer this thing for free, much like Netflix, is that you got to have to deal with some paid advertisements. So if you want the cheap Netflix, you're going to have to get the paid advertisement version. And so I'm going to just say this in self proclamation kind of way. This is sponsored by PT Academy, which is my own website and company, and a company which allows me to promote courses like this and part of the Move Coach credential. And I do have upcoming courses, as you can see. There's a Move Strong course of which this lecture, and the reason why, again, I offer this for free is that this lecture, this seminar, and this practical part 2 is going to be a portion of that as pre-reading. So I was able to do this. I wanted an opportunity to present this material for the first time to a group of people and sort of really like work the kinks out. Make sure that I do a great job with the material for when I do record it and put it online as part of the Move Strong course. So it'll just be a part of the pre-reading portion of that course. So you can see it's got 2 dates, is stretched out over 4-hour periods on both of those dates, April 27th, May 4th. Everything's fully recorded. Everything happens live in this location. If you're from Victoria or the island, you want to come join me. I said 4 people could do so, but we easily could have 6 or 8 people in here if we needed to, in order just to make sure it's not disruptive to the online recording to the people. But having people in the background, much like having my wife here to support me, allows me to show the techniques in real time, working with real people. That you also get the previously recorded version of this, which I did last year around the same time. This is early January, as a matter of fact. And that same thing, I offered up an opportunity for a student to come here and do the course with me. She found a lot of value in it. So if you have the opportunity to come, there's a specific promo code. So you're getting $100 off only until March 7th. So you have 1 week basically to operationalize against this. So you have 1 week to take advantage of an additional. So it's already on sale for $299. Till now, until March 7th, I'm mind blowing myself and giving you this course for $199. It is 12 hours of content. It's 80-page textbook, a whole bunch of different progression matrices. As you can see, I'm a big fan of progressions. When you see what happens today, you'll understand that. I also have a certification program. So if you're not certified, I know a lot of you are kinesiologists, but if you're not certified, you do want the opportunity to get a certification and work as a certified personal trainer, learning how to actually service people in real time and bringing, I would say, the business of personal training, not just your basic anatomy and physiology, exercise physiology, biomechanics that you're already familiar with from university and from textbook learning. It's more about how to work with a real person in real time, how to truly service clients and make good use of your time and hopefully set you up for success early in your career. As you can see, there's another wonderful promo code attached to that. And it's also on sale for a brief period of time. So just a couple of opportunities for you to keep digging into the education. But for now, let's get right into what we were meant to do. So now we're out of the paid advertisement side of things. And what I want you to recognize here is that when we program these movement patterns, so hopefully some of you have seen the science section and you understand the philosophy and the logic that we're going to move through. I always think through a lens of movement, not muscle. So although there are certain muscles involved, and you'll hear me talk about specific tendons today, we always think about that in an integrated pathway. So some of the integrated strength pathways are things that are listed right now. But I think the other end of it, which is more that spring loading, plyometric, taking advantage of myostatic stretch reflexes, et cetera, and some of the elastic components of our body, we start thinking about different movement patterns. And you can see those are listed out, and that's part of the Move Athletically program, for example. And then what I want to lean into today pretty hard is this idea of vector variability. It's the idea that we got to not just do a movement pattern exactly as it has been prescribed and programmed in a textbook, meaning this is how you do a good morning. Yes, of course, this is a good morning. But so is this a good morning, and so is this a good morning, and moving things in different directions and pressing loads away from the body instead of just keeping them at body, and understanding how to progressively move load, how to move speed from low to high, and how to change directions in all the different vectors, and understanding the importance that will have on fascial tendon movement-based outcomes, and in fact, pain-free living, which is a power tool that we want to have. So this is really where we're going to really focus today. So from that note, the only thing you have to think about when we're building out these progressions, no matter what, no matter which movement pattern you choose, which elements you decide to lean into first versus last, like I do have it built out in a phase 1 through 4 kind of mindset. That being said, if you adapt appropriately from low to high, range of motion, speed of motion, load, or total amount of intensity of motion, directions and fatigue, and you take them from low to high, you can basically optimize every moving part of the tissue in the human body. And this will always play true for anything that is associated with, kinesiology based or kinesthetic type work and work learning. So here's what's going to happen today. So we're going to break this all down. So phase one, and this is just a theoretical model. It's not the only model. There's lots of different ways to have success when presenting models, but it is a philosophy of movement. And that's what I want you to really focus on, is the philosophy of movement. So my philosophy, and one that has been highly successful for myself and a lot of the people I've worked with, and I've had a great deal of success in this pathway, is I like to establish end range of motion first. Not just end range, but the entire range. We tend to be very good through limited range of motion, but we also have restricted ranges of motion which need to be taken care of and cleared up due to fibrosis, due to inactivity, due to overuse of certain muscles, due to fibrosis known as scar tissue and previous injuries, etc. You name the number of reasons why we could have lack or poor range of motion or restricted range of motion. We need to establish it. What I want you to start thinking about, though, is not just the normal safe range of motion, like thinking about patella tendons and keeping the knee behind the toe is a safe way to train heavy loaded patterns. But if I'm doing relatively unloaded patterns or I'm preparing for high velocity movement patterns, then I need to start to think about the specificity, knee over toe, how much dorsiflexion is required, how much patella tendon compliance do I need to accept the continuous load that's going to be put on the body. And if we start really thinking about life and sport and fitness, and we really start to think what the possibilities are, we realize that we've been working through a safe range of motion and leaving behind a huge important part, which is the end range of motion, where the dense connective tissue exists. So that's what I really want you to focus on. So in this first phase, we focus on establishing end range and good general strength. So because once we put strength and tension on any of our joints, there's going to be a pull, and that pull is going to take the crimp out, as was previously mentioned, and is going to start to load the serious elastic components, the parallel elastic components, and also the contractile elements that sit within the muscle. So we need to get it all done. We're not thinking this is a one and done. I'm not saying that you're only training fascia when you work at end range, that you're only training the tendons when you're working at end range. I'm saying it's a portion or a gap where we can now start to optimize movement. And when I start to think about range of motion, I'm like, sometimes you have assist the range of motion. And then once you've assisted it and you've gained it and you've achieved it, then what we can start to do is actually start to apply resistance into that range of motion and start to really lean into the idea of optimizing range of motion through resistance or stability. And that's an important component. Once we get to phase two, we're going to start to progressively load through range of motion. So we're going to start working on progressive overload. And that means speed, that means intensity, that means fatigue or the total volume of work, etc. So from that end, that's what we're going to work on. And at the end, we start to really layer into this idea of stretch shortening cycle and elastic recoil and that true balance and that kangaroo catapult effect that it naturally built inside of our body. We start to lean harder and harder into this idea. One of the concepts we're going to discuss today is called loaded movement training, or LMT training. It's brought first to me, this concept, although I was training loaded movement my whole life as a part of my mentorship that I received through Twist Conditioning, back in the early 2000s, and through another group called SAQ International. I've always been doing it. It made sense to me from a basic movement athlete perspective as well when I was, training in these techniques. But similarly, and more importantly, it's the lost art. It's the thing that we don't do as we get older. It's the thing that then leads us to this potential of injury in the Achilles tendon, the potential overuse and inflammatory responses that we get in the patella tendon, jumper's knee, some cutaneous problems that exist inside the body. So we really want to try and start eliminating this by integrating from a phase one to a phase four type approach, taking people as far down that pathway as they're able to go. So the first thing, again, understanding is this idea of if we're working on vector variability, and I presented the load vector in the research update that I did previously, this time we're going to work on range of motion and think about range of motion. And although we're not going to go deep into it like I did previously, because some of that material is already presented, I want you understanding that every vector needs to be taken care of from low to high. or from less to more, if you want to think of it differently. And then I'm going to bring Joanne on screen right now. So what Joanne's going to start doing, she's going to actually start working on, so I'm going to slip off to the side just a little bit so you can see her working in the background. So she's going to grab one of the fascial sticks. She's going to start without the stick initially. She's going to work on her foot. So what you're going to see here is that this idea of proximal to distal scrub. So when I talk about the idea of proximal and distal, I mean, I'm thinking about the idea that, you know, closer to the midline of the body, farthest away from the midline of the body. When we think about tendons, we often think of the insertion points, right? So we start thinking, now Joanne's working on the bottom of her foot, so she's going to use different scrub techniques. So although the foot is not the Achilles, the foot is the end play of the Achilles. So if you don't have good glide, fascial glide, and you don't have good proprioception and function in the foot, what's going to happen is that it's then going to put strain on the ankle and support structures, including the Achilles tendon. So having a good foot and good foot mechanics is a power tool to making sure that you're there. So similarly, we're going to then look at the idea, this was in my Instagram, so I'm giving you one more shot to scan this code, okay? So go ahead and scan this code if you can. That's going to take you to the Instagram, but this idea of the banded dorsiflexion. So, you know, Joanne and I actually did this exercise as part of our warm-up this morning. And you're going to see this idea that we can apply this, like what we call pin and move technique. So we pin the foot down, the ankle, and the Achilles, and all along that calf. When we do dorsiflexion over top of that, to try and get as much ankle dorsiflexion range of motion as possible to start stretching out the Achilles, to start bringing the Achilles into tension, to take the crimp out, to start to put load into the Achilles. The ability to put load into the Achilles first means getting range of motion. So this exercise that is in this Instagram post will certainly show that. It was also part of the snippet of exercises I did at the very beginning of part 1 that I sent you last week. The coach reach and rotate is one of my absolute favorite exercises as part of the Move Better program. So I'm not going to have time to get through all this today, but what I am going to do is you're going to see, so Joanne's now working her way up. So she's going to do one thing. So I'm going to stop her right now before she goes any further, because we need to do an assessment first. So before she gets in, so one of the things I'm going to show you is the before and after effect of doing what we're going to do. So this scrubbing technique, what she would do in normal situations, she'd do the bottom of her foot, she'd do medial, middle, and so I don't know what to say, but normal, so medial, then down, like straight down the Achilles tendon, up and down side to side, and then more to the lateral side of things. And then she would do the exact same thing up high. So we'd be working high and low on these patterns, so we'd be more up on the calf. So looking at where the insertion points are, same thing is going to happen up on the patella, working its way all the way down to the tendon, then the quadricep tendon, and working its all the way up into insertion on rec fem up on ASIS. So we got to start thinking through that end point part. And because it's so neurologically innervated, there's so much proprioceptive information being sent to those areas of the joints because of how important they are from a self-sufficiency perspective, from a movement perspective, from a do not injure yourself self-defense mechanism perspective. So what Joanne's going to do next, I'm going to come off the ball. She's going to lie down on this mat. She's going to always be doing her right leg. So she's got right leg facing. So first thing I'm going to do is assess her range of motion, because we're going to start working on that. She's going to work in the background again in a moment once I continue down this slide. It's a very simple, nothing complex. I'm doing very simple assessments. I'm going to bring her right heel. So she's going to do it herself. So pull your heel towards your bone as far as it'll go. So straight line, good. So you can see the distance of the heel to her glute right now, roughly. That's her active range of motion. And if I take passive range of motion, I can get her heel almost to her bone. So a little bit restricted, but a pretty good range of motion. How tight is that? You feel stretch?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so she feels a stretch right now. So we just get some feedback from the client always. So that's one. The next part, if the quad's a little bit tight, it's common that the glute won't fire. If the hip flexors are jacked up, for sure, if you have tight hip flexors from sitting diseases, etc. So Joanne, we're going to do a muscle test, but it's not part of this assignment. I just want you to see the difference. So this is where, so pull your heel to your bum again one more time. So this is the distance currently. Good. Your line of drive is up. My line of drive is down. Do not let me push you down. Keep your forehead on your hand for me, please. Ready? Drive straight up. Hold, don't let it move. Oh, drive straight up. Hold, don't let it move. She's got nothing. Okay, so she doesn't have a glute right now. I want to see what's going to happen. So that's those first two. Now she's going to flip around, face the other direction. So the right leg is still to you. So this is a hip flexor. Yeah, so she's going to pull her left knee into her chest. And then what you got to do is just look right here. So you look to see if there's a gap, and there's a significant gap. So that's an indication that the hip flexor complex is relatively tight. So what we want to do is change this as part of the whole patella complex, okay? So the patella tendon is not just the patella tendon, it's the quadricep tendon, it is the entire rect fem and all the rectus aponeurosis that sit inside the quadricep group. So with this entire fascial line. So the first thing we're gonna do, she's gonna punch herself up. So she's gonna work in the background again. So she's gonna scrub while I talk. So she's gonna scrub origin insertion or distal and proximal. So go open the patella tendon. Up here. Okay, so she below, please, below your knee first. So just below your patella tendon. I'll just scrub this. Okay, so she's gonna scrub her patella tendon. She's only an ICU nurse educator. She should definitely know where the patella tendon is, by the way. But now she's gonna do that a few times, and she's gonna go to the quadricep tendon, so just above the knee, but she's gonna go inside, outside, lateral. Just to make sure we get everywhere. We're just gonna cover off that entire complex, but down at the distal portion of the line. And then we're gonna go to the proximal portion of the line, because we're gonna try and open that whole thing up. But if you want big bang for your buck, you go for those two things. Now, I'm gonna get her set up after this, so she's gonna get up top, she's gonna go up top. You only need a few seconds in each spot. That's the power tool. Do this for everything, for your Achilles tendon, for your patella tendon, for all the muscles that sit, origin insertion. Any muscle that you can get access to origin insertion using a ball, using a stick like this, and using this quick scrubbing technique can change the game quite significantly for people. Okay, so what she's gonna do now is we're gonna get into what's called the chair stretch. So she's gonna go chair stretch. That band is in an anchor point above her. This is quite an aggressive fascial stretch, so the reach and rotate should probably occur first. What's simple about dropping your knee to the ground if you can? Good. What's the good part about this stretch is that initially you could be further away. So she doesn't have to have full range of motion in the quadricep to start this stretch. Now, if someone's got terrible range, these are not entry point stretches by any stretch of the imagination, part of the fun. So what we're going to start to do is work on the fine points here. Okay, so this thing about this line. What she's gonna do, she's gonna let the band pull her up. So the band, can you do like a hook through grip? Hook it through and grip. So now the band is just, she's not gripping it, so she's not gonna fight it anymore. So what we're gonna work on now is creating length in this line. So you can see there's still a little bit of hip flex, so a little posterior pelvic tilt, a little bit of tilt, use your lower abs, just a little bit. Squeeze your glute just a tiny bit, joint. Good. Now, a deep breath, easy does it. So this is a lot of stretch for even her. I want you to lengthen. So through your exhale, lengthen this line. And through your exhale, feel like you're pressing your femur down and into the ground. So you're going to create length all the way from, so you can see how open this line is right now. So right away, this is obviously a hip flexor stretch, quadricep stretch. We're working all of the things that are necessary. So as a fundamental concept is that we need to get these long fascial line stretches as part of it. So this could be up dog, down dog could be part of the posterior line that we're going to get to, etc. So we get into this idea. So the next part we're going to do here is we're going to do a few other exercises. So the first one's going to be a band leg extension. So I'm going to change where the camera is right now. So I know you can't see this exactly. And when we get to the full-fledged practical portion of this. So what I want you to do though is watch what she's doing, listen to the description that I'm given. I know this is going to be in playback. It's going to be a very small screen. She's going to sit on the bench. I'm going to move this over. So we're in position to see this a lot better. So what we've got set up here is a band. So this is what's known as accommodating loads. So this is the very first one on here. So what I love about the band extension, okay, so one of the things you have to think about is the idea of getting proximal strength, okay, before we worry about our prior distal strength. So we want to make sure we have distal strength. So in this case, she's going to do a banded leg extension, but watch what she's doing with her left heel. She's digging it in. So we're actually getting inner range hamstring strength at the same time that she's doing terminal knee extension. She's doing isometric holds. She's doing at least 3 seconds. She's going to squeeze. She's got core activation by pushing into the handles. This is an absolute game changer of an exercise for the patella tendon. So one of the pieces of research you saw previously is that the patella tendon, through Dr. Schlepp, is shown that younger athletes or athletes that are at risk of injury through the patella tendon, jumper's knee, etc., often cannot resist because they do not have enough strength in this distal end of the patella of the rect fem muscle group. So this is a great exercise for doing that. It also trains in the inner range to make sure we get both ends, the origin insertion, the proximal and distal points of the long chains. Another one we really love for opening up the hip flexor complex. So I'm not going to do all of these, just one couple of examples of exercises that fit within the category of these things. Okay, so Joanne's going to slide back. She's going to do one that we did not practice this morning. Actually, you know what? I'll do the demonstration on this just because she's not quite might be a little more time. They're very simple. This is one of my favorite exercises for patella tendons and for hip flexor complexes that are not a hip flexor complex exercise. So what you do, you slide this back into a hip flexor stretch position. You get a band. You choke up on it as necessary, depending on what your strength level is. You put your knee on your elbow like you're getting ready to do a concentration curl. So what this is going to do is actually work inner range bicep as well. My back toe is tucked under, so I've got first metatarsal extension. I'm going to punch my glutes as I extend open. So I squeeze my glutes. This is an incredible rep fan stretch. So squeeze my glutes, lean backwards, come back in, release the band. Inhale. So I'm doing a lot of things here, all in one shot. It's super powerful. It's an absolute game changer as far as hip extension goes, and therefore a very, very, very useful exercise. Okay, so there's several other exercises here on the list, a couple of which we're going to cover throughout the seminar. So I'm just going to leave it there for the moment. I'm going to move on. So you get the idea is that there are a lot of different ways to strategically load isometric training. So when you get to that end range, you stay in there for 3 to 4 seconds, at least, maybe longer. The point is get there, let the tendon have tension on it, let mechanotransduction occur, let the crimp come out of the muscle, and let that go through an adaptive change and get the stress in there. Stay longer at the end range of motion. Blood flow and circulation is not as adept as it is in mid ranges. So a little bit of isometric holding at the end range will allow time for tension and mechanoreception to occur in such a way that I do think a great adaptive response is possible. So that's just to get some insight into this idea of different ways to work on it and to think through this proximal range of motion idea. Getting joints strong at one end, getting each joint, getting it strong at the proximal end, getting the joint strong at the distal end, and then at the same time, making sure that we then open up the long chains. And that's sort of the mindset you want to have when going through this. And if we start thinking about a different vector, the vector is speed, we're going to start thinking about stretch shortening cycle, plyometrics, power training, etc. But for the most part, what we need to start thinking about is the elastic components, particularly in the idea of fascia and tendons. I don't know if anyone saw my Instagram for yesterday, but right around this time, I was sitting in the Walmart parking lot. We're actually just getting a birthday card for Joanne's mom. Long story made short, there's a guy presenting from Johns Hopkins University, this research they've done in astronautics about mice jumping in space. And the idea of what they're doing is building up cartilage in the knee. So they actually look at the knee cartilage itself, and the results are quite miraculous. So from that end of things, understand the power that the stretch shortening cycle is, that plyometric has, but how challenging it is because most people aren't prepared and aren't progressed well into the ability to do so. So from a very simple endpoint here, just need to think through this lens. The vector variability idea is that everything needs to be trained. Slow speeds need to be trained, high speeds need to be trained, and all the speeds that are in between need to be trained. And what we've really found is that this mid zone is where the big bang for your buck can occur. With proper progression, people can do this idea of loaded movement training. So think like kettlebells. Think like the Viper Pro, which is sitting up in the background back there. Think ballistic stretching, and then start to progressively add load to it. There's lots of links in here for you to be able to click on and get additional research and information from. So at the one end, it's connective tissue dominant. And at the other end, it's contractile dominant. So when we're using very heavy loads through the middle ranges of motion and mostly on the center line, most of the work is being done by the contractile elements, right? Myofibrils that we're working on sarcomeres and specifically on sarcomerogenesis and all the things associated with changes in terms of adaptive responses in the sarcomere. Once we start moving towards end range and we start dividing the stretch parameters in different directions, we start getting a bit more of a plyometric and elastic tension response. And once we're in this end range elastic tension responses, even though we're working all elements all the time, we start to change the emphasis towards the connective tissue, towards the dense connective tissue known as the tendon. And we're always at the same time training this loose connective tissue that sits inside the perimysium, the epimysium, the endomysium, et cetera. And I'm sorry that I'm throwing out a ton of terminology. We have to know this stuff to truly understand the impact that we're making. So here's the thing you take away from the stretch shortening cycle before we start doing all this stuff. When you're in it, there's only two major concepts to keep in mind. Eccentrics are powerful. Learning how to stop before you drive power and start is important. And we're going to do some of this drop and stop action. We see a real change in some of the, one of the things I'm certified in is the FRC group. And so from that perspective, I'm starting to see the FRC group start to really get into this idea of low eccentrics, which is kind of funny because I've been doing this for such a long time, but I'm super happy at the same time to see it. We also have to identify the difference between a long stretch shortening cycle action and a fast stretch shortening cycle action. So very commonly, long stretch shortening cycle actions, which are very important, loaded movement, is a resisted type of stretch shortening cycle. So that's something like a jump squat. So Joanne's going to actually do a jump squat for us in the background right now. So you want to grab those 2 dumbbells. Luckily, we've already worked out, so she's not fully warmed up for this. So don't do this at full intensity by any means. But when you do a loaded jump squat, you can just do it on the mat here. When you do a loaded jump squat like Joanne's about to do, you open up your stance a little bit like normal. Good. All right, so she's going to drop down. She's going to jump twice. Don't go quite as far. Good. So you get a longer and a slower reaction. Now, vice versa, you can put those down. It's not going to be perfect, but a fast stretch shortening cycle would be an assisted stretch shortening cycle. So she's going to do not a pogo jump, although a pogo jump would be appropriate here. She's going to do a little bit more of a jump squat. She's not going to attack the ground too aggressively right now, but what you're trying to think about is if I assist it, so like assisted sprinting, or if I'm doing pogo jumps, or if I'm doing an assisted jump squat. So she's going to actually do a jump squat. Good, quicker off the ground. You're going to notice that she's got a quicker response mechanism, not as deep a knee bend, and really quick action. That's good. Really quick action off the ground. So we need both. But we start with loaded eccentrics. So you're going to see that when we come up here in a moment. The reason for doing both, and the easiest way for you to pull all of it together when you're training for life, sport, and fitness is this idea of a complex training. We all have seen the science behind it. We understand the idea of post-activation potentiation enhancement and or PAPE or PAP, depending on where you're reading the research. Regardless, if we do heavy strength training in combination with some kind of spring training, although they try and come up with these complicated explanations to why that's beneficial, and they look for the exact timelines. Truthfully speaking, what we're trying to do, regardless of optimizing performance, is optimizing contractile and connective tissue elements inside it. So we got to start thinking differently. Not just heavy exercise with a biomechanically similar plyometric exercise, but indeed the idea that we're going to do heavy contractile dominant work, and then we're going to follow it up with connective tissue work. We're going to put them together in these supersets. So when we start programming, we got to start programming against the type of fiber that is being stressed, the type of adaptation that we're looking for, and ultimately understanding that some combination of both in as many possible different vectors as possible is where the solution truly is. Okay, so hopefully you're following me, because I know I'm going through this relatively quickly. Here's a little bit of research. Here's some information I pulled from a great article in a strength and conditioning journal that shows a couple of examples. I do this stuff all the time, and part of that Move Strong course go into this quite a bit because I actually show many different versions of complex and contrast integrated training. And then here you can see some percentages that are associated with that go along with it. So I do think if you look at the tables on the right, they give you some good information around optimal loads to use for things like resisted sprinting followed by normal sprint, etc. Okay. And the key is like when you're thinking through those lenses, like okay, how would I change that vector? So if I was just doing a barbell lunge and then following it up with a skip or some kind of single leg cyclic jump, what would I do to then change the vector? Do I just like take that bound and move it a little bit diagonally? Do I take the lunge and the split squat, and do I not just go off the sagittal plane but start to move it in different directions? Could I twist the bar over top of that lunge? Of course. That's the mindset I want you to have, because that's no matter what I give you as information today, I want you thinking, how would I stress the entire fascial system? Go back to the first lecture, start to think about this idea of the muscle and the series of elastic components, the horizontal elastic components, and the parallel elastic components, and how we can emphasize all of them, okay? Loaded movement training is a great way to think about it. If you look at all the science around the kettlebell, there's a ton of it. There's no need for us to go any deeper into its understanding. You think about the thoracolumbar fascia and its integration down into the glutes and then down to the ischial tuberosity, which then goes down to the hamstring and the posterior line. and also through, even as tie into the lats, it's really powerful to start understanding this integration concept and how we need to start training the white stuff. All right. So ultimately, we need to think about beyond the muscle and through the movement and taking it all the way to end range, starting putting the appropriate progressive stretch in there. There's no way we're getting through this entire slide. Some of this, again, has been previously posted. I'm, over the course of my preparation for Move Strong, I will start to add some of these videos into the progression matrix. That's extensive already. I think there's like 50 or 60 videos in the progression matrix already, and then a bunch more done live. Here's what we're going to do. Okay, so we're going to go through a series of exercises. So the first one is going to be the band heel locked circles. So this is a posterior tib exercise. Joanne's going to lie. So remember, we did an assessment on Joanne. Now, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to turn off screen share. Okay, so what you can see is I've got this exact slide up in the backdrop. What I recommend you do is you screen copy this right now. What am I trying to show you, Joanne? Screenshot. So screenshot this exact slide because I'm going to come off of screen share at the moment. You also have the decks because I sent it out to the vast majority of you, those of you who registered ahead of time, so you can be able to see us in full screen mode. Okay, so I know I'm not leaning into the questions. Keep firing at the chat. I will go back and visit the chat here in a little bit, take a small break on it. Ultimately, at the end of the day, so Joanne's got herself set up. She's got herself set up on an angle. So you're not going to get a great look at this because of how far away she is. Can you come forward for me? You just stay on that same kind of perpendicular angle. Her anchor point's perpendicular. She's got to come out a little further to the left. Good. Now, can you show that graph again, Joanne? Can you show yourself wrapping that up one more time? So watch. She's going to put it around the heel. Strong tension already on the band. So that creates a bit of a posterior glide. Anterior glide in the ankle joint. Yeah, there you go. So it creates some space and she wraps it in a little figure eight in the front and we slide across the front. Now what this does, and this is where this is powerful, okay? So I can't spend a lot of time on this because otherwise we would be bogged down big time. This is right around the base of her first metatarsal and it's going to create great arch support by training the posterior tibialis. So what she's going to do is she's going to come across. So the posterior tibialis, function-wise, is a plantar flexor, an internal rotator, good, and there you go, and pronation at the same time. So she's holding pronation. Here we go. So now she's going to come up, dorsiflex as much as she can. She gets as much dorsiflex as she can. She's trapped her tib and fib head so they can't separate from one another. So we've got this fixated. Now this band actually assists her on the way back out. So she increases eversion. Good. So what she's got to work on a little bit more. So she got a great glide. Now stop right there. So you can't see this, but she has an amazing arch right now. It creates such a great arch. And because the posterior tibialis is pulling and shortening, and she's going to come up in a hard dorsiflexion. So one of the things we want to do now is get that in range. So I may support the dorsiflexion. And then when she goes out, she's got to evert as much as she can. So although this is not a straight dorsiflexion exercise, which means straight Achilles tendon, it's supporting foot mechanics. So come up. Good, big dorsiflexion, hard as you can. So now we're getting that end range of motion dorsiflexion that's required to get an Achilles tension load available to us with strength training, with plyometric training. This exercise is an absolute game changer. If you haven't done this exercise, add it to your toolbox, add it to every one of your clients' toolbox, especially if they have flat feet or if you're seeing any kind of pronation in a squat or an arch that is collapsing successfully on one side versus the other. That's the first one. The second one, you're going to think, once we establish range, you're going to start functioning the range. So we're going to start thinking about the range and its end function, in this case, either being called sprinting or jump squatting or box squatting, if you like, one or the other. So you can see there's two different progressions in here. So the other one that's in here that I really quite like for a strengthening perspective, for the posterior tibialis, where you put the ball on your heel. So the second one we're going to work on, ball within the heel. This one actually I learned this one from Dr. Emily Slickle. So you notice the ball is actually quite low. You get it behind the heel and below the heel. So that way you're not pinching on too much in the way of any nerve. The key to this one, you squeeze the ball, and then as you come up, you're going to watch Joanne's ankles roll under the ball just a little bit. Okay, so good. She comes up. Ankle's going to roll under the ball. Good. You go back down. Come up, squeeze the ball, and then you roll your ankles, try and roll your ankle under the ball. So that's called the posterior tibialis calf raise. And one of the things to think about is although we want ranges of motion that go past neutral, initially you want to stay within these safe range of motions and work on good foot mechanics as well as establishing great dorsiflexion range of motion. So in combination, the two work really well. The third one I'm going to show in this little group then starts to bring in the specificity component. So I'll demonstrate this one really quick. So this would be a simple lean forward position. So like as a runner, as a sprinter, as a walking up a hiller, you're going to have this position where you're going to need more dorsiflexion. So one of the things I like to do is work on dorsiflexion in a forward lean position. So you get into a forward lean, anchor yourself, you bring the goods onto your pelvis, you have reasonable good mechanics, and then you just simply do a switch out on the march. Now, what I like about this actually is beyond just the Achilles load and pushing that knee down. So at the bottom, I want to press that knee into terminal knee extension. What I can start to work on is terminal hip extension, terminal dorsiflexion, get as much of it as I possibly can, gentle stretch in the ankle joint, but I can also work on the front leg mechanics. So as this leg starts to come up, I can start tracking where this foot's going. Is the foot directly under the shin? Do I have relatively neutral posture through the pelvis, etc.? And that's really what I'm trying to gain from all this. And if I don't gain all of that, then I have to start thinking a bit differently about the movement pattern. So that's the established range of motion phase. Phase two for me is where we start to get a little bit more aggressive. So we start adding a bit of a vector change. So the first one's called a wall fall. And then we're going to do a 1 foot. The wall fall was part of the Instagram post. So we're going to go right into the 1 foot elevated split squat. So Joanne's going to bring the plate across. She's going to grab load. So now the load's not meant to be light on this. Okay, we're just keeping it simple. That plate's going to come over here onto the mat, Joe. So she's going to put the plate onto the mat just to get closer so you can see her on the screen. Good, awesome. She's going to put it down. The key elements to this one is that we're going to get into a front foot elevated position, which allows for a deficit in the back in that heel. Okay, so now the Achilles, we're going to start working on range of motion beyond the neutral of the posterior tibialis. We could do this straight leg as well. So it could be a straight leg version. This obviously ties into a little bit of the soleus more than gastrocnemius because of the bent knee position. She's going to do the isometric hold still. Okay, so she's going to push up, going to hold the top. This is going to challenge and strengthen the tendon, particularly sort of more in that proximal end. And then she's going to hold for 3. She's going to go down. She's going to get to deficit. So she's going to go below neutral. She's going to hopefully hold her balance. Okay. If balance is an issue, honestly, then or if she's flexing too much in the hip. So I don't want to see some reciprocal foot hip extension, chest up a little bit. Good. So this hip should ideally, if not, what you do is drop this knee to the ground. Good. So less balance, less sort of foot mechanics requirement. Same thing, keep doing the exercise. So now she's going to focus on a deficit down bottom, deficit down, 3-second hold. She's got the base of her first metatarsal as her anchor point. And she's going to drive up. She's going to drive straight up, nice and strong. She's going to hold that top position. As you can see, the stress now has to be on her hands down through the dumbbell. Without doing so, there's not much basis to this exercise. As soon as she takes her back knee off the ground, she increases the load of this exercise quite significantly. But there's a significant balance component. Sometimes I often will just do one-handed and have the other hand available for support in a balanced way. So that's that one. So that's a great exercise. One of my favorites is also very challenging. It's fun to watch your clients grimace a little bit because the legs are burning usually at the end of it. And then the second one's a rear foot kickstand squat. So I'm going to move the plate out of the way. Okay. You're going to put that band on your foot, please. Facing away. We've done this one before, Joe, as part of our warm-ups. Okay, so what you want to do is come over this way. Okay. Good. Come straight up. So now that anchor points directly back behind her. This is where we're going to start changing the vectors around a little bit. So this becomes her rear foot. So this one's her rear foot. This one's her front foot. So you're going to see what's happening here. I'm just going to turn this a little bit. Okay, watch when she squats down. So this is just a rear foot squat. So she's in a, stop there for a second. So what I want to make sure initially is that does she have good mechanics? Is the hip swinging too much? Is the knee tracking right over the second and third toe, which in this case it is now, it wasn't previously. And now she's got knee way past toe. The heel, sometimes what I'll do, come back up. If the heel's lifting, I'll support the heel. So I'll get a bit of an anchor. Good, go ahead, squat down. It's going to come to the other side. So she's now working on good squat mechanics. I may have to support the ankle joint. This should be creating what's called a posterior glide this time. So we're just shifting that ankle joint in different directions, come back up. 3-second holds, maybe 5. With decent loads, not meant to be light. Okay, it's meant to be a fairly heavy exercise. So this is a rear foot kickstand squat. It's specifically designed to put load through the squat pattern with an Achilles heel dominance. Okay, good setup. That's good. Awesome. Okay, so that gets us through that Second, the one that's missing here is a deceleration stop. So what we're gonna do now, so what I usually do, the first early phase of phase 2 is I work on this end range strength component in slow isometric fashion. So that was some of the research I presented that came out of Europe. Copenhagen, I believe, if I remember correctly. Then the next one is this last one where you drop into it like this. So now, same idea, forward leans, and from this position, sitting back down, but not letting the heels hit the ground, right? So come up, calf raise, full calf raise, sit down, get into that position where you're still on the balls of your feet, but the Achilles is starting to take load on the way down. So we do these drops, and you can start loading these drops as well. So right up into the toes, full extension, sit back down, slight forward lean, like you're in a forward running position, or if you're going to do a repeated box jump. Okay, Joanne's practicing in the background. So ultimately, we need to pull all this together. So that's phase 2 for the Achilles tendon, for example. So end range strength, deficit end range is a good way to do it through that split squat, and moving farther forward and start going into this idea of the eccentric deceleration stop and goes. Okay, so last, now we got to start adding the plyometric components. We need some pulses. So if you look at this one, Joanne's going to do what's called a weekend at Bernie's. So this is a combination of patella tendon and Achilles tendon. So she's going to turn sideways. Okay, so watch what's going to happen. She's going to hold the first one. So head back. Good. She's going to get good alignment. She was really trying to like get into character and do some method acting right there. So I don't know if you know what Weekend at Bernie's is, but if you don't, look it up. It's an absolute classic of a movie. Knees are way past the toe. Sometimes you'll notice if someone's got a tight ankle on one side, that foot will start to rotate out. Turn this foot in for me. Turn it in. Yeah, there you go. All right, so now if that starts rotating, so then I could still be part of the anchor point. I can always be part of the solution, come back. Now what she's going to do, she's going to go down and hold for 3. She's going to drop into it a little bit quicker. And she's going to start bouncing. Her knees are coming together. So try to keep your knees. Yeah, go straight in. Yeah, go straight ahead. She's going to bounce. So she's going to bounce it in. So you bounce in, you bounce out, bounce in, you bounce out. Various versions of this, get that pulse training. You got to start pulse. Go ahead. You could fire it back into a squat behind this, right? So she could go here and then fire it back into a squat. Fire it back into a squat like we do all the time. Yeah, that's it. Good. So you could start to challenge complexity of the movement pattern, etc. So there's no one way to do it, but that here is an Achilles stretch, patella tendon stretch, a rect fem aponeurosis stretch. And it's doing all the work, but it's doing it in an elastic recoil bounce. So we're going to start training the series elastic components, parallel elastic components. We add load to it. We're also going to start getting more of the transverse components as well. So on top of all that, the idea is we pull it all together. So the second piece is called a speed march. So similar to the walking march, now we just speed it up. So the progression will be you just add speed to it. So I want you to do this one. Right, put your hands both of them one. So she's going to get that forward lean. Good. Now, yeah. Now I'm gonna. So she's gonna drive down with a switch, follow your foot. Good. Good. So I'm letting the heel come all the way down, and she's actually pressing down. Pause. Good. So what you do is you check the mechanics on the front end. You make sure you get terminal knee extension, and you get good long lines down for the Achilles. If you want to challenge, you just move it slightly farther forward. Go again. Couple more. And then we start managing the cylinder too to make sure this is working well. Go ahead. Fire. Good. Yep. Okay, so obviously that's some of the things you can start working your way through. And then at the end of the day, that turns into loaded jumps. So in this loaded movement phase, we want to bring in the slow stretch shortening cycle. Not the fast stretch shortening cycle, but that slow. Give the body a bit more time, give the tendons a bit more time to adapt and respond, and transfer it into something. So our option would be a prowler. So I actually have one of those tank things over here. We're not going to do that today. It's too difficult. But Joanne could be doing a banded resistant like sprint. Joanne could be doing jump squats, which we obviously previously described. Now she's warmed up, she's going to do some jump squats. So go ahead with the belts again. So this is where you would load the elastic recoil, stretch shortening cycle. So you're going to get a longer stretch shortening cycle response. Turn the other way, turn sideways. Open up your stance a little bit. No, turn sideways. Okay. Good. So she's going to try and not let the belts hit the ground. So she's going to try and adapt the drop and jump and maximize it. So more like a shorter jump, right? But get as much out of it as you possibly can. Point the landing. Fire. Come on, quick rock grip. Fire. Feet, quick. Fire. Lead it. So fire. drop, real quick, tighter turn. Good, that's it. So you're gonna, that's good, you're done. You're trying to encourage quick turnaround time, but the load is gonna slow it down, and that's okay, because it gives the time for the tendons to adapt. While we're still working on mechanics, while we're still working on building that enhanced nervous system that we need, that's gonna be required for success at end range, if or at speed. So regardless of which way we're doing it, we want to slowly and progressively overload all the different elements. So that gets us through that. Phase 4, we turn that in. I wouldn't recommend doing this in bare feet. Can you grab your shoes? Okay, so you're gonna grab your shoes. So when we get to this end range idea, we're gonna do what's called a repeated box jump. So we're gonna convert this. This would either be sprinting or skipping at high velocity. Could be running up a hill is another way to sort of do the last phase, so a little bit more of a loaded movement training, for example, that requires great dorsiflexion similarly. But in this case, what we're gonna do is you can either turn this into a repeated box jump, which is what we're about to do, and you'll notice the angles here are required. So you're gonna have to have the strength in the Achilles. You're gonna have the ability to be able to use your Achilles in a suspended 4-foot position. And then you gotta be able to move it from there. So I don't know what I'm going to do. There, I'm just gonna demonstrate. Okay, so good. All right, so repeated box jump. You have a slight forward lean. So you're gonna have a slight forward lean no matter what. So your attack angle is forward. So that's why we did all this forward lean marching stuff, because the attack angle, either for sprinting or for a repeated box jump, is a forward angle position, because your body leans its center of gravity beyond its base of support. So do a couple slow ones just to sort of prep yourself, warm up. Okay, drop down, no, drop down, drop and catch. So watch, now she's gonna drop off the box and catch herself in a heel elevated position. So jump up, drop off the box, catch yourself in a heel elevated position, try and catch yourself. Yeah, there you go. Okay, go again, jump up. Okay, drop down, catch yourself in heel elevated position. So this is another one of the things I do to prep this. Now we do it repeated. So she's gonna go on and off 3 times. So nice and quick. Pop, pop, quicker, pop, pop, quicker, pop, pop, quicker. Good, there you go. So get the idea, that's it. So you want to try and get that nice explosive reaction time. So that's what you're aiming for in phase 4. So if you start now, what we've missed in this whole process is this idea of vector variability. So we're going to go back to that. Now we're just going to drop back, come back over here. Can you get into that heel lock position again for the rear elevated, the rear foot squat? Watch how we're going to change it. So all of this would be, do we need to do a repeated box jump always going forward like this? Of course not. Could I turn and jump back up? Exactly, right? So don't keep training people straight lines if our goal is getting resilience in the tendons in as many different vectors as possible to make sure they have a buffer depending on, we always think through the sprint lens because that's the high performance resource that we have. We always think through the squat lens because that's a high performance resource that we have. But we can do them all in different directions. So can you face right at the camera? So she's got her anchor point straight behind her again. This becomes her rear foot. Watch what we're going to do differently. So previously, I had her going straight ahead because that's base. That's home base. Okay, go ahead and squat. Good. So instead of home basing it now, squat down. This time, rotate towards your left knee. Squat up and down. We do a normal squat. Squat and twist at the same time. Look where the knee goes. Okay, come back up. Squat and twist in the other direction. Right. So we're going to start changing the vectors ever so slightly. When you twist in, that knee comes inwards, move into a valgus knee position, start training the tendons, the fascia, everything associated with the patella tendon plus support structures. And there's nothing wrong with it. What you have to remember is the degrees of freedom principle. Can't go super heavy if you're going to come off midline, and you have to progress from relatively low to high. That's good. Let it go. Every exercise, start changing the vector. So instead of just doing this with the toe pointing straight ahead, do your marches with the toe out. With the toe in, so march and toe in. March, toe straight, march, toe out. And keep changing the vectors. You know, you can have a dominant vector, depending on what specificity is, but we got to keep thinking differently. And therefore, we start to understand this whole idea of proper tendon optimization and fascial optimization. So can you scroll the next screen for me? So we're going to go on to the next one. I don't know how much we're going to get through today. We're going to do as much as possible. I'm a huge fan. So the next one, actually go to the, yeah, there we go, patella tendon. Awesome. I love the patella tendon. progression here. So although I did put the posterior line progression in as well, just as a reciprocation, because I love this idea of antagonist training. I think we're going to end today on the patella tendon. This is where all things are on the table to start. We need to do myofascial release. Can you do a quick scrubbing technique on your quadricep with the foam roller? Yeah. So now we've done origin insertion scrubbing, but there's nothing wrong with scrubbing the entire length of your quadricep. So she's going to show it real quick. So this is phase one. No, face down, lying down, quad. So she's going to get down to a quad kneeling position. She's going to scrub that foam roller side to side. So you start at the distal portion of the, so she's on the quadricep tendon. She's going to scrub it. She can do some hamstring curls from there to get what's called a glide. So she's going to get a pin and move technique done, create some fascial glide and some hyaluronan stimulation, some fascial set stimulation, etc. So she would work her way down that entire thigh. Good, doing the hamstring curls. So the hamstring curls, I usually try and support it to try and increase that active passive range of motion and keep working it through. So I'm always there to be a supportive portion of this. That's step one. So we start to free up that fascial glide, create that fact that we showed that one of those first slides of the day. The second one is that banded half kneel bicep curl. So she's going to now do that. So now I've demonstrated before. She's going to grab the band. She's going to do that half kneel bicep curl. So we are prepping the patella tendon because she's in this kneeling position, which is a quadricep stretch. But this focuses a little bit more on the proximal portion to get this hip flexor pattern. So we're going to show you a few things here. A couple things are not on the screen. Go ahead, bicep curl extend. Good, punch the glute as much as you possibly can. Squeeze the glute, tighten the abs, tuck your toe under fully. So you don't have to do it this way, but given that we were working on the Achilles tendon, and I said the plantar fascia is part of the Achilles tendon, that first metatarsal is a really powerful element here. Pull, extend, you're not working your right side, right? Okay, so Joanna's going to switch. We had a rule before we started today that no matter what I said, she's going to do her right side because I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get this right all the way through. So remember, we assess the right sides. This is why we're doing this. So bicep curl. And we'll call the other one a good visual demonstration, shall we say. So the same idea here is the goal is to squeeze that glute, ribs on the pelvis. Good. Technique matters on all this stuff. So making sure you're driving great technique is really important. Good. Excellent. Big breath in. Lean forward for me. So you go flexion dominant first. You go into flexion and then you come out of flexion and go into extension. And now she's got inner range bicep tendon work being done as well. As an eccentric contraction on the bicep means she's pulling up and holding it. The accommodating load of the band is really useful too because it makes it harder as she gets towards end ready to make the glute have the glute to work. This would be resistant strength and hip extension, obviously. Okay. This is where it gets fun. Okay. So the next one's a half kneeling tabletop. So there's a combination here that's like she's gonna do them. She'll lay down here. This one, the one we did earlier. So we did this in our workout earlier. So watch where she's gonna set herself up. Don't bring it back. Yeah, there it is. So this knee lines up with that foot. This toe pointed out. I think we'll go. Okay, there we go. Watch what's gonna happen. So this is normally just kneeling first. Can you do double kneel first to start? Can you double kneel? So if you can't double kneel, this one's not gonna work. So you gotta be able to double kneel and you pin your heels under your butt for it. Good. So I often have to push mine in, to be perfectly honest, and that opens up that entire line. So now the ankle and the tibialis anterior and everything else is part of this. If you think that it's just a patella tendon, it's not. You also have to have a good tibialis anterior and have flexibility right down to that ankle joint. So making sure those feet are capable of coming under your bum and getting in different directions, right? Straight in, turned in even further, pushed out to the side, and then this progresses to this. So watch what's going to happen. She's going to reach back. Now we're going to drive hip extension because I want not just the distal end, patella stretch. I now want that proximal end. So she's going to drive up, look back, look back, look back, look back. Good. She's going to look back, reach back, similar to that stretch that we did previously. Good. But this is a very much can you kneel and not be in excruciating pain. So you may have to do all things quads to get to this. And then we start working through these patterns. And then you would just have at the same time, you might be working on just your basic squat. So you just get your basic squat moving through, and that knee extension exercise that we did previously. So that isometric knee extension exercise also super useful here. So some combination of that knee extension plus the squat that we did are absolutely useful. Now, this is where it gets a little bit fun. And we start thinking about that proximal end. So Joanne, can you go ahead and show those band leg extensions again? So I put this in phase 2. Only because it's very specific to the patella tendon. I've had patella tendonitis myself in the past, and this actually helped me out quite a bit. So she's gonna do 3 more reps. Gonna drive that right leg up strong. She's gonna hold. Now she kicked into it with a bit of power, so I can see that she's warmed up now from all the stuff we've been doing. She's got a great upright torso. She's not collapsing through the cylinder. She's driving out leg extension on that other side. I'm just gonna let you see the angle a little bit differently. Good, awesome. Okay, and remember, she's working in a range on the hamstring as well at the same time, which is absolutely useful. Now, watch what she's gonna do. She's gonna do a lean back. Can you, here, let's stand up for a second. Then move back just a little bit. Okay, she's gonna do with now, she's gonna do the proximal end. Watch. This is an exercise you may have seen on the internet. She's got a double band situation now. She's gonna still use that heel support. So now she's getting assistance off that hamstring. She's gonna lean back. Good, opening up the hip flexor complex, going past neutral, come back up strong. Good, now throw yourself back just a little, so a little bit of an eccentric component. Good, so as you get stronger, now the band is more useful than you think.
Yeah.
Because you had a fixation point here, that foot would not move that 1.5 inches that it's moving right now, and it would put a lot of stress on this hip flexor complex. By having a band, you're getting a slight accommodation to allow that hip flexor to have that moment to decide if it's okay and not trigger Golgi tendon responses, next mechanisms, etc. So this is super useful. So again, she's doing the right side, which is great. Okay, do a couple more. Good, she's going past neutral, so this should help that assessment. And we're working the end range at the proximal side. Okay, good, beautiful. Once all these things are established, we can then go into what's called the reverse Nordic. So you can see this is, again, this is more distal end. So the reverse Nordic works both sides if you do it well. So I'll slide box there. Good, she's gonna need a mat though, so I'm gonna grab her a bit. There you go. So the reverse Nordic, lots of research. I think I presented one of those pieces of research when I did part 1 of this. In fact, I know it. She's going to make sure she's far enough forward that she can pull the band forward. You don't have to use a band, obviously any anchor point, any Nordic hamstring bench, any glute ham bench, you can do this work off of this. So what she's going to do right now though, she's going to focus on the technique. So she's going to create that irradiation tension to the core by putting her hands in front of her body. She's going to fist, make a white knuckle fist out of it. She's going to squeeze her glutes to make sure she's got terminal hip extension and get that proximal extension that we're looking for. Most of the work is being done down distal end. Okay, so she's going to lean back. Get as far as she can possibly go. She's going to get to that first point of tension. By this point, we should have now. She's obviously been working that right side, so the left side might be barking at her a little bit right now because the right's been loosened up quite a bit. She's going to reach back. Squeeze glute. Look to the corner of the room in front of you. Look to the corner of the room in front of you. Good deep breath. Progressive overload on this will be holding load. We'll be moving back into an eccentric drop and stop. So can you start to speed it up just a little bit where you drop and stop a little bit, come back up.
Okay.
Good, drop and stop, just pop, stop. Good, awesome. So obviously you gotta catch yourself, right? So we're getting that eccentric load. So initially you start with those 3-second isometrics, maybe 10-second isometrics. You start to speed it up like this. Good, awesome. Good job. Last one. Good. And then you might go back to that same calf raise drop squat, right? Or even dropping off the box like we did previously. But like I'm very commonly, I would go back to this one where we were here with this and dropping up into that calf raise position because the knees go past the toes and therefore you get a little bit of patella tendon loading. Yeah, you're good. It's awesome. Good job. Oh, you could turn that into a reverse Nordic to Nordic combination, to be perfectly honest, but not necessary in this case. So that will be where we start to strengthen and we really focus on those end range motion techniques. And then we start moving it into the stretch shortening cycle piece. So we start to add in. So you can see here, she's going to go back to weekend at Bernie's. So again, weekend at Bernie's, as I said, with both Achilles and Patella tendon. So she's going to demonstrate weekend at Bernie's again. But given that she's a bit more warmed up, let's say she's a bit further along in phase 3, she's going to shoot this a little bit more. So I want you to be a little bit more aggressive, Joanne, like this. Do the get more boom, boom. Now she squeezes her glutes to keep that hip extension. Okay. She's gonna have the glutes fully fired. Stop there. You see the line, it's straight. She's not arching her back. She's just putting tension down this line. So this getting stretched, this getting stretched. It's a good bang for your buck. Again, watch for one foot moving outwards compared to the other. Okay, go ahead. One more. Good. Last one. Yeah, so you would do somewhere around 8 to 12 of these repetitions for the most part. And then now, again, changing the vector. So we start thinking through that patella tendon. So far, a lot of it's been straight ahead. I think everyone would agree. So turn and face the camera for me. I want you to bring your feet together. I want you to draw big knee circles. Now do about 6 to 8 of these and then change your angle so you have a lateral viewpoint for them. Watch how far her knees are coming past the toe. She's going to reverse directions now and circle in the other direction. And you're actually now working the Achilles and patella tendon in different vectors, directionality wise. And again, you can progressive overload speed. You can progressive overload the range. You can see now what's going to happen. Watch. You can see how far the knees are going past the toe, right? So we're actually putting intentional load into patella tendon. If we start here though, we could irritate the patella tendon. It's really important that we not do this type of work too aggressively. Now, could this be a phase 1 exercise? 100%. You just have to slow it down, manage the mechanics, and not move the knee past the toe nearly as far or nearly as fast. All right, what's next on that list? Kettlebell jump squats already there. We've already covered that one off. So hip extension options, burpee. So the bench rock back we did. So that one where she had her foot anchored in rock back. The next one that's in there though is a burpee. So watch this fascial burpee. So this loads that proximal end again. So it's not a traditional burpee. The focus on this burpee is less patella tendon and more that hip flexor complex. Okay, so go ahead and so she's gonna pop in and watch this. She's gonna drop her hips to the ground. Now, up dog is a great preparatory exercise for this. Load the hips into the ground and fire up. Now do a burpee. There we go now. Down there, one motion. Load the hips, spring in, spring out. Don't pause. In and out. Up, right? No pause. In and out. Good. Bit quicker. Up. Good. Up. Good. So you might start low and slow, like she did, slow, and then start to speed it up. And you're intentionally trying to get to that end range and load out that fascial system and those tendinous units as well. Okay, it's really important. Last but not least, to get to that patella tendon, think pogo jump. So previously we did more of a jump squat technique. Joanne's going to now really try and ankle and knee this. Okay, so if we're in phase 4, now we got to speed it up. Okay, we really got to try and get quick on this. So she's going to hit the ground. Watch, it's going to be a slight pulling action every time she comes and hits the ground. She's going to, flap the ground, flap, quick. Quick, flap the ground, toes up, toes down, toes up, toes down, toes up, toes down. Got it. Okay, so the pogo jumps, and then also if we think through that proximal end, you just do basic leg swings. Okay, can you do a leg swing right side only? Don't whack anything. I think so. Yeah. No, forward back. So we're working on that hip now. The forward back leg swing again, same idea. You don't have to do it. Go ahead and just start leg swing. Yeah, you're good. No. Good. You gotta whip your heel to your bow. Whip your heel to your bow. Good, there you go. So now she's gonna start speeding it up. Okay, so you're gonna start speeding up so you get the actual whip. So once you start speeding it up, it starts becoming more cyclic, like a sprinter, right? So you can see that whipping action that she's running through. We can clear up the mechanics and stuff to make sure she's going relatively straight back, but it doesn't have to be straight. Intentionally abduct the leg, right? Intentionally adduct the leg and bring it across the midline. So your leg swings don't have to be straight forward or backwards. They can be intentionally this way, that way, foot turned in, foot turned out, like do different things with it. So you don't have to be exact in this pattern. So the mindset we've had previously and the one that isn't optimizing tendons and fascia is to always send it in the same direction. What we want to do is start thinking different directions, different vectors, as many possible combinations as you can possibly imagine. To finish this off, although we're not going to get through the whole slide, if we look at that posterior line really quick, I will open this up to questions in a second. Okay, so you look at the posterior line, the thing to think about is that there's a bunch of different ways to get great range of motion through that posterior line. Down dog, up dog, one of my favorites. I'm going to show you a technique called the Eldo technique. Joanne's never done this, but she's going to sit upright. Straight leg raise is one of your power tools to establishing great range of motion in the back half of the body. So obviously we're not going to cover all this off. There's no way, but I'm going to show you one from each phase. Okay, so Joanne, what I want you to do is I want you to externally rotate your hands as much as possible, like this. Bend your wrists as much as you possibly can. So she's going to externally rotate and bend as much as you possibly can. So from this position, managing a very good cylinder, hard dorsiflex, good core tight. Turn your hands as far as you can backwards. Good, screw external rotation as much as you can. Great extension, looks awesome. Lift your right leg up as far as it'll go. As far as it'll go. Yeah, straight up, make sure it goes straight. Good, put it back down. Good, 3-second holds is what you're aiming for here. Good, external rotation. Good, pack shoulders, ribs, and pelvis. Use your breath, inhale. Exhale, lift up. Up, hold 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so you can do this with a band as well. So you can actually put a band around your hip. So the band goes here, goes up around the hip, and then you replicate that whole thing. It creates compression in the joint versus the opposite. So good. Phase 2. So one of the things to think about, even in phase 1, is if your standard straight leg strength, like partial range SLDLs, etc., would be appropriate if progressed properly. Once we get to phase 2, we're going to use a slightly different variation. We're going to use what's called the Benson. Okay, I have the Benson hinge and I have the deficit SLDL. So she'll show the Benson hinge first. This is absolutely amazing. And yes, it has my name for a reason. Okay, so she's grabbing low. Yeah, she's going to grab low. So you can obviously, this is a good morning that has a specific sort of element to it. So first thing she's going to do is deep squat. So the deep squat's patella tendon, the Achilles tendon. Now watch what happens next. She's going to now press up and back. She's going to drive her hips up and back. Good, go back down. She uses a relatively flat back. Now we don't always have the flat backs to do optimized tendon. Good, deep breath. Go. Up. Head down. Neutral. Good. Drive the hips, straighten the knees. Good, big breath. Punch up. Punch. So that band in terminal knee extensions, that forces that distal end to have to work really hard to antagonist strength. So she's got to drive vastus medialis, terminal knee extension, and then she's trying to get herself up into that nice long line. So clearly have to have range of motion before that's going to happen. Okay. All right. Then the second one is a deficit SLGO. So I'll just move the plate in place. She's going to grab both bells. So the point here now, watch what she's going to do. You're going to have a standard deadlift technique, followed by what I would call, forget what, there's a name on this, by the way. Turn sideways one, please. Good. So she's going to get her whole foot on the plate. You have to get to more than normal range of motion for this to work. So she's going to take this all the way down, deep breath. Good. Now watch. So she stops there, and now she folds. Let it go, and the head go. So we actually go longer, so we get further down. Initially, come back up, strong. Good, reset. And so she resets in between. Eventually, you don't have to do that. If it was super heavy load, we'd have to stop in the mid ranges and work mostly on those contractile elements and work the tendons through crimp, which would work. But if we really want to get into hand range, we have to lean into it. We have to go all the way. Deep breath in. Back up. Good. Good. Awesome. So the deficit SLDL is super useful and something you should probably think about adding to your toolbox. If Joanne somehow can find my clicker in the course of the next 2 minutes, I don't know where it is. Anyway, so that's that one. So the next one on there is, if we look at it, we got Nordic. So the Nordic hamstring curl. So the one I like for the Nordic hamstring curl is a bent knee Nordic hamstring curl. So she's actually going to slide the bench in. So Joanne, slide that bench in. I'll grab the foot. These are some of my favorite exercises. We'll get that later. That's good there. You're under that block. Good. So you just now do this bench. Oh, thank you. Excellent. Look at this. So she's going to set herself up. There's 2 versions of this. We all know what the Nordic hamstring curl looks like. One of the things that gets missed from the Nordic hamstring curl perspective is not firing the gastrocnemius. Okay. You actually do want to. So we've got a lot of we have a naturally built-in plate here. So the heels are fully anchored. She's going to push into that heel plate or into that toe plate. She's just pressing into the toe plate to get the gastrocnemius to work, to take crimp out of that long chain from the bottom. Squeeze the glutes. Good. She's got her hands available to her, obviously. So we're going to use the hands. So big breath. Go as long as you possibly can. So good. And then release to the ground. Push up. And then, yeah, there you go. She uses this little push off as necessary. So really focus on the eccentric portion of this first. Good. Now, it's a really hard one to do drop-in stops in, but you could theoretically do a drop-in stop. If I had a TRX in front of her, for example, no, keep going. You're good. So watch. If I was to help her, she could go all the way to the ground. So one of the things you can do is bring in assistance. So the thing we miss out sometimes is not adding assistance to this component. So she's going to do the exact same thing. All right. This time she's got assistance. Good, so what she's gonna do, she's gonna let the handles go forward, okay, watch. She's got herself engaged, now she go all the way to the ground, bring herself back up. Okay, this time I want you to do a drop and stop, okay, so go down and catch yourself at about halfway down. Drop and stop, stop, come back up. So you can run your drop and stop protocol here too, right? So you're drop and stop by using assistance of the handles, okay? That's it, that's good. Now she's gonna do a bent knee version, so for more of that distal end, so working more down here. Okay, so getting you more into this component. So the deficit deadlift. So now this really works hard down here. So we're really working on that posterior tendon complex, you know, semimembranosus, semitendinosus, bicep femoris, and some of the adductor complex too, to be perfectly honest with you. Good, you got to keep the thigh vertical. So this has to stay absolutely vertical. This needs to stay relatively neutral. You can add load to this also as you want. So these are great exercises that can work that chain from a strength perspective, deceleration perspective, and then obviously what we want to do next. And this is the last thing I'm going to show. Come on, Carl. If we're working on that SLDL straight leg position combination, one of the things I like to do is take this off center. So we've worked on deficit. What we haven't done is worked on vector variability. Can you grab the Viper? If you know what the Viper is, you should look this up. ViperPro.com. One of the guy who invented Viper Pro is one of the smartest educators on the planet. His name is Michelle Dalcourt. So she's going to put one leg in front of the other. She's going to kickstand the other foot. Not that one, the other one. Good. All right. Now come away, Joanne, this way a little bit. Yeah, you're good. Yeah, fine. Watch what she's going to do. She's going to sweep. So she's going to do an SLDL but with a sweep. Good. So she's going to sweep through. SLDL, Joanne. Keep your legs straight. Good. Awesome. There you go. So now it changes the vector. You can see the hip shifting. That changes and puts emphasis on the outside. And then now if we reverse it and goes the other way, she sweeps the other direction. No, this time, so take it from the outside in. Take it from the outside in.
Outside in.
Yeah, take it the outside in. Now you start to work a different portion of the hamstring complex. You can see where it moves, it goes long to the inside, so you start working more medial. So what we have to do is again, think through lens, that's good. And then we got to turn into like plyometric stuff. So if we want to turn into plyometric stuff, we actually have to turn into a sprint, the long leg swings again, so that leg swing action would still get some plyometric, but we can also do what's called a puppet bounce. Can you do a real aggressive puppet bounce for me? So watch her bounce, okay? So everything's lined up now, doesn't matter, do both. So she's gonna go down, hands to ground, puppet bounce, breathe, head down, the whole thing. So full flexion pattern. Don't have to bounce this way. Good, there you go. That's it. So you ragdoll, but you throw yourself. You use your abs and you throw it turn sideways. Watch your flexion. So it's full flexion head to toe. Now different directions. Throw the hands through your legs. Throw the hands left. Throw the hands right. And pick up all these different vectors. Okay, I think that's enough for poor people. Okay, so that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I'm just gonna click off a couple of, so I'm gonna go back to screen share here real fast. So hopefully you got a few things out of that. I really hope you did. There's a couple other slides in here with complexes and stuff built into it. So as you can see, well, I don't think I did that wrong. No, definitely not. Start again. Share. Oh, what's going on? Whatever. Okay, so as you can see, there's a number of other slides sitting here. So you work your way through the rest of the slides. They're just giving you ideas of phase one, phase two, combinations of movements that I showed you throughout the seminar, and how to put them together in these connective tissue contractile dominant supersets in ways that you can do them relatively quickly inside the training sessions too. So you don't actually have to spend long times waiting in between, or you can always throw in an antagonist movement too. So when you're going from the contractile dominant to the fascial dominant, you are working different elements of the chain for the most part. So therefore fatigue isn't as much of an issue as you might imagine. Remember, the idea of the tendons and the fascial system is efficiency. And the outcome of efficiency, therefore, is going to be something that allows you to work in that same pathway and not have cumulative fatigue. But I would highly recommend after this, you see there's a recovery exercise, get off that chain and onto a completely different chain, doing something else that's productive as your third exercise. So obviously the summary slides are pretty straightforward. They cover off all the key elements that we've talked about throughout both part one and part two of this seminar. I truly truly hope you've enjoyed the information that you've learned. I tried to pull it all together in this final slide, sort of again, working back through the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, 4 perspective. And the only thing that really matters, no matter how you progress people, no matter what system, what philosophy of movement you have, is that you have do no harm, right? Never cross that tissue tipping point. Or if you do cross it very gently so that the body can go through an adaptive response mechanism instead of a cumulative breakdown mechanism and leading to, injury. For what we're trying to build is resilience and injury resistance, not injury. So being injury prone. End of the day, again, remember, the reason why this seminar is free is because it's a paid advertisement. And the paid advertisers, please sign up for some of my courses. The reason why I can do some of this stuff for free and give back to the community is because I do get paid to do this for a career. I truly hope you've enjoyed this today and learned a lot along the way. If you did see value in this today, when I send out the follow-up email, please take 2 minutes to write 2 sentences to tell me how much you enjoyed, what you specifically enjoyed. Do a post to your own social media post and tag ptacademy.ca in that post. I'd love to see the work you're doing. If you adapt something and put your own unique spin on it, it would be absolutely amazing. I'd love to see that too. You're going to see different advertisements come out. I will definitely post the links again to the courses that are upcoming when I send the follow-up email. I appreciate you very much for giving up your Sunday. Hope you enjoy the rest of it. Thank God spring has showed up and we have some beautiful weather out there for us to go and play and frolic in this beautiful land of ours. So have a great day. Appreciate you very much. I will stay here and answer any questions for those of you who want. I'm going to stop the recording, but if anyone has any questions for me, by all means, fire away. I'll see what's in the chat too, just in case there's something important in there. Great question. Michaela just asked, how would you apply this to someone with hypermobility? So you would focus a bit. So although you'd still want to make sure they had end range, which they would have, and you might still do some of the scrubbing technique. The scrubbing technique actually stimulates proprioception and mechanoreception. So it upregulates the mechanoreceptors, so the muscle spindles, and will actually upregulate. So I highly recommend the scrubbing technique just to create that little bit of defense response mechanism around the joint at end range. You would actually reverse the process. You would start working more mid-range work. So you'd get that strength at end. So go to end range, but put load on it, but very gently. Make sure you have some at end range that when you add load, that the joints don't shift next to one another. So you don't see the ankle and the calcaneus moving one relative to one another, et cetera. So you're going to want to have isometric holds, very progressive, start from low to high and go from there. So ultimately at the end of the day, like safe, go to end range, but establish good mid-range strength first. So reverse it, go after the strength work. Do as much mobility work as necessary to establish good mechanics at end range, and then progressively start overload strength and stability into the patterns. Isometrics will be super useful. Hope that answered your question. Hi, Aaron. For RDL with range of motion beyond horizontal, do we justify the use of exercise?
So a bit of my background, I'm an ergonomist and also kinesiologist. So
yeah.
I've taken some courses that talk about the silence of the erectors beyond trunk flexion. So if it's loaded, are we trying to stretch fascia and thoracolumbar fascia or hamstrings, or what's the goal beyond that?
Okay, so it's you're asking a great question. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is get to the elements that are not being trained. So we're actually trying to load the tendons and load the fascia that's attached to it. So the myotendon junctions, et cetera, are where the strength doesn't exist because we don't go there. So ultimately, it's never really silent. So the lumbar trunk muscles are never completely silent because they are being pulled on by the fascia. But the vast majority of the myoelectric work, to your point, is happening in the fascial joint. It's happening in the fascia, it's happening and it's the crimp and the tension. So what you have to do then is start thinking, if I go out to end range and I establish end range, and I have tension at end range, the adaptive response is going to occur at this distal component of the tendons, and therefore create a more resilient end range situation. And it'll also be just part of getting that elastic recoil. So the point isn't to stop is to think that you're training predominantly to contractile elements. Is do the exact opposite, is get to the tendon and the fascial units that exist at in range that are usually not touched.
Okay,
Or
thank
touched,
you.
okay, minimally touched. They're all being touched all the time.
Yeah, I just myself just caution with that tipping point argument that you came up with.
100%.
Just if it's loaded excessively, then where do you start drawing the line? I guess I'd say.
Yeah, as you go past like those ranges where you're, at end range of muscle length tension relationship, like we all know, right? I mean, it's not a fact. We know that to be true. Once you get at that end, you got to start reducing load. So you wouldn't, if you're going to do that kind of deficit deadlift, it's approximately 40 to 50% of max. And you might even start less than that. You might be at like 20 to 30% of max and progress yourself up to 40 to 50% of max. You would never exceed 50 to 60% of your max load, and without thinking that your disc and other things are going to like eventually start to come under too much load and too much tension and cross that tipping point. So,
Okay, appreciate the answer. Thank you very much.
yeah, no problem. I appreciate the question. Very thoughtful. So over what time period does it run through these sort of exercises? Oh yeah, great. No, I agree. So interestingly enough, the research as far as we have up till now regarding fascia is that it adapts at about the same rate. Now, most of that research was looking at the loose connective tissue stuff. We obviously know that tendons take a longer period to adapt. So my basic rule is that if I'm working on sort of like standard loose connective tissue, which happens through the normal ranges of motion, is that you just follow the normal training programs, like 4 to 6 week adaptive processes, upwards of 8. And with tendons, I try to double down. I basically go, what, they don't have as much blood flow. It takes a lot more effort to get tension into the tendons. The adaptive response is a little bit slower. So you got to start thinking more like 12 to 16 weeks. So anywhere from 8 to 16 weeks is where you start to see in the research where the hypertrophy and the sarcomerogenesis, or in this case, the filament, the fasciogenesis kind of stuff, where you're actually starting to see fascia bundle changes, both from a parallel perspective and a serial perspective, getting hypertrophy and increasing in density. So that's usually longer. So the research that's showing up that has a positive adaptive response is somewhere between 12 and 16 weeks, and if not longer. So I would just at least add 1/3 the amount of time, probably double the amount of time to get the type of response you're looking for. But the fascial response is just that load, the loaded movement training type response, not at end range, same as normal muscle fiber mechanotransduction myofibril disruption research, which is somewhere in that 6 to 8 week territory. Oh, yeah, great question. The personal training certifications, CamFit Pro. The reason why I've gone with CamFit Pro, honestly, is that I'm an author, so I've written some of the stuff on the assessments that were in there. So I did a bunch of the assessment part, and they updated their textbook during the pandemic, so it's very much the most industry relevant textbook that's out there. I've taught NASM. I know what the BCRPA curriculum looks like. I was one of their ICE trainers years and years ago. I fully aware of what the ACE content looks like, and there's nothing wrong with any of them. In fact, I quite like the NASM content, but the CamFit Pro is probably the most industry relevant, service forward, client-centered textbook that I've seen. So I went with it, and I don't have any regrets. I think it's actually really good, really well organized certification. Plus, when I teach it, I teach you everything you need to know, and we teach you everything you need to know to make sure you're likely set up for success in the industry. So that's it. We good? Welcome. Thanks for everyone for being here. I appreciate your time very much. And I really look forward, if a muscle can be elongated, I'll answer this last one. If a muscle can be elongated farther than the end range of a joint, it seems your methods could be putting excess strain on the capsules and ligaments before sustaining. What is your caution to avoid joint and progressive overload? Just start slow, start with less, building towards more. Joint capsules and ligaments are obviously being stressed at the same time in a very similar way as the tendons. And so therefore, the interesting part is that don't think we can't build a stronger ligament, because you can. And then it's the same idea, is that doesn't have a lot of great circulation. So we're going to build better ligaments, better tendons, better capsule structures. Just have to be careful and start slow. Start slow, work your way into those end ranges, overload from lower intensities to higher intensities. Be very careful. Make sure that you are asking your clients what they feel. Make sure you're paying attention to the mechanics of the movement patterns as much as possible. That, you know, the load, stress, strain feedback you're getting looks plausible. You've followed safe parameters to get from A to B, and you should be very safe. I've trained at end range all of my clients, including myself, for a very long time. I've been in this fascial, I would say, era for 20 plus years. In fact, I think I was one of the first ones to write anything in the fitness era for IDEA. I wrote something called Training the Weekend Warrior, something like that. I can't remember what the exact name was, but back in 2020. And this was all about fascial lines at the time. Our knowledge has gone a lot further. We know now that it's safe to go to these end ranges. You just got to be progressive and, you know, be a great instructor, be a great coach, and not be afraid to go there, because the truth of the matter is the greatest result is available to you, and pain-free movement is significantly changed if you can safely and effectively get people to those end ranges. So just be careful how you get there. I've never injured, just as an FYI, I've never injured a single client, capsular wise, joint wise, and that's 25 years. That's including athletes where we were getting after it before my knowledge got to this point where it currently is. And a couple of my clients are in their 80s and full tilt ninjas for an 80-year-old and a 75-year-old and a 70-some-odd-year-old. But be safe. All right. Appreciate it all. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Please, I look forward to your feedback, good or bad. Hopefully good.